The funeral hall was silent, until a single sound broke through the grief. A German shepherd, Officer Daniels' loyal K-9 partner Rex, suddenly leapt into the coffin and lay across his handler's chest, refusing to move, refusing to let anyone come near. No one understood why. Officers tried to pull him away, but Rex growled, whined, and pressed himself harder against his fallen handler. Some officers whispered that it was grief. Others believed it was loyalty. They thought Rex simply couldn't say goodbye, but no one knew what was about to be revealed. Something was wrong. Something Rex knew, but no one else did. Then, when Rex's behavior grew frantic, something terrifying became clear. Rex wasn't just mourning. He wasn't reacting to the crowd's whispers. He was trying to warn them. And when officers finally opened the coffin, the truth they discovered shocked the entire police department. Stay with us, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The funeral hall was so silent that even the softest breath felt loud. Rows of uniformed officers stood shoulder to shoulder, their polished badges glinting beneath the dim overhead lights. Some stared straight ahead, jaws clenched. Others blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that refused to stay hidden. The atmosphere carried a heaviness that pressed into every chest, a weight of grief, guilt, and disbelief. At the very front of the hall rested the casket of Officer Michael Daniels, draped in honor, framed by white roses and the folded American flag. He had served the department for 17 years. He had survived raids, shootouts, and burning buildings. Yet today, he lay still, untouched by the noise and chaos of the world he once protected. But what held the entire room captive wasn't the sight of Daniels alone. It was the massive German shepherd lying inside the casket with him. Rex, his partner, his shadow, his other half. The K-9 rested his head on Daniel's chest, his body curled protectively along the officer's side as if guarding him one last time. His ears drooped, his breathing slow and heavy, his eyes fixed on his fallen handler with a depth of sorrow no human could describe. No leash, no commands, no gentle coaxing from familiar voices could move him, not even the officers who had raised him from a puppy. Whispers filled the back rows. He hasn't moved since they opened the casket. He didn't even drink water this morning. It's like he doesn't want to let him go. Near the aisle, Daniel's closest colleagues stood frozen, their grief mixed with something else. Confusion. Rex had always obeyed, always responded, always listened. But today, he refused to acknowledge anyone, as if the world outside the casket didn't exist anymore. An older officer stepped closer, clearing his throat. "Rex," he whispered gently, "come on, boy. You need to step out." Rex didn't even blink. Another officer, younger, tried offering a soft command. "Heel, Rex. Heel." Rex stayed still, pressing his body closer to Daniel's uniform as though protecting him from being taken away. Even the chief of police paused, visibly shaken. "Leave him for now," he said quietly. "He understands something we don't." Heads turned. A chill slipped through the room. Because deep in their hearts, many of them wondered if Rex's refusal to move was more than grief. Maybe it was something he sensed, something he knew, something no one else had discovered yet. And this silent, unwavering vigil was only the beginning of the truth Officer Daniels left behind. 3 days before the funeral, before the flowers, the folded flag, and the silent hall filled with uniforms, Rex had already sensed something was wrong. Officer Daniels noticed it first. Rex, usually calm and disciplined at home, began pacing the living room in tight circles, nails clicking anxiously against the hardwood floor. His ears twitched at sounds no one else could hear. His tail, normally high and alert, hung low like a shadow behind him. "Buddy, what's going on with you?" Daniels murmured, crouching beside him. But Rex didn't settle. He nudged Daniels repeatedly with his nose, guiding him toward the door, then back again, whining in a tone Daniels hadn't heard since the night Rex saved him during a raid. It was a warning sound, soft, uncertain, but filled with urgency. That night, Rex refused to sleep in his usual corner near the fireplace. Instead, he planted himself beside Daniel's bed, head up, eyes fixed on the doorway as though guarding against something unseen. Every creak of the house made him bristle. Every rustle of the wind outside made him growl low under his breath. Daniels tried to calm him. "It's just the wind. Relax." But Rex didn't relax. The next morning at the station, things became even stranger. During briefing, while officers discussed their schedules, Rex stood stiff beside Daniel's chair. When a certain officer, Sergeant Collins, entered the room, Rex's posture changed instantly. His ears shot up, his body tensed. His lips parted slightly in a silent warning. Daniels noticed and frowned. "Rex, hey," he whispered, placing a hand on the dog's back. "What's gotten into you?" But Rex didn't take his eyes off Collins. It wasn't aggression. It was recognition, as if he knew something about the sergeant no one else did, something Daniels dismissed as stress or confusion. Later that afternoon, Rex refused to get into the patrol car for the first time in his 7 years of service. Daniels had to coax him inside, confused and frustrated. "What is with you today? You're acting like the whole world's about to fall apart." If only he knew how close that was to the truth. That night, Rex's anxious pacing grew almost frantic. He barked sharply at the window, paws scraping against the floor. Daniels checked outside. Nothing. Just darkness. "All right," Daniels sighed. "Tomorrow we'll get you checked. Maybe you're getting sick." But Rex wasn't sick. He was warning him, begging him, trying desperately to tell him something terrible was coming. Long before the funeral, long before the whispers and unanswered questions, Officer Michael Daniels was known for one thing above all: heart. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the quiet strength that made people trust him instantly. He wasn't the type to bark orders or flaunt medals. He was the cop who knelt beside frightened children, who bought coffee for homeless veterans, who stayed late to finish paperwork so younger officers could go home. And Rex wasn't just his K-9 partner. He was his family. Their bond had formed years earlier when Rex was still a restless young dog with too much energy and not enough discipline. Other trainers struggled with him. Daniels didn't. He saw something different: intelligence, loyalty, and a fire that just needed direction. He trained Rex himself, spending hours in rain, snow, scorching heat, never raising his voice, always patient. Their first rescue together became station legend. A missing 6-year-old boy lost in the woods for hours. Night was falling. The search team feared the worst, but Daniels trusted Rex, and Rex trusted him. Together, they tracked the boy through mud, thorn bushes, and freezing rivers until Rex found him curled under a log. Daniels wrapped the child in his own jacket and carried him out. From that night on, they were inseparable. At the station, Daniels was the officer everyone called when things got complicated. His calm presence could diffuse the angriest suspect. His sharp instincts solved cases others overlooked. And whenever he walked into a room, Rex was one step behind, silent, alert, loyal beyond question. But beneath the uniform and the easy smile, Daniels carried burdens no one else knew. There were nights he sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at old case files long after they'd been closed. Nights when Rex rested his head on Daniels' knee, sensing the weight he couldn't speak aloud. Daniels often whispered to him, "You're the only one I trust completely." Rex understood more than people realized, and lately Daniels had been quieter, more distracted, more troubled. He brushed it off as exhaustion, the toll of the job, but Rex's watchful eyes followed him closely, sensing fractures beneath the surface. Daniels wasn't afraid of danger. He had faced it countless times. But someone, was beginning to haunt him. Something he never shared with anyone. Something Rex sensed, long before it took Daniels' life. And soon the entire department would learn that Officer Michael Daniels had been carrying a secret, far heavier than anyone imagined. The night Officer Daniels died didn't begin like a tragedy. It began like every other late shift. Quiet streets, a cool breeze, the soft hum of patrol cars moving through the city. Daniels sipped from his thermos, glancing at Rex in the passenger seat. The dog was unusually tense, ears stiff, eyes darting to every shadow. "You're still on edge, huh?" Daniels muttered. "I'll get you checked tomorrow, promise." But Rex didn't look away from the window. Something outside had his full attention. At 10:42 p.m., the radio crackled. "Unit 7. Report of suspicious activity at the old Ashford warehouse. Possible break-in. No other units available." Daniels exhaled. "Of course it's that place," he muttered, turning the wheel. Rex growled softly, low and troubled. When they arrived, the warehouse loomed like a giant in the darkness. Rusted metal siding, shattered windows, and a reputation for things people never spoke about out loud. Daniels had been there before on minor complaints, but tonight the air felt heavier. Still, wrong. Rex stiffened in the seat, refusing to move. "Come on, partner," Daniels coaxed. "We've done this 100 times." But Rex planted his paws, refusing to jump out. Daniels frowned. "Rex, out." Reluctantly, the dog obeyed, but his body stayed low to the ground, ears pinned back, tail rigid. He wasn't taking commands now. He was issuing a warning. Daniels lifted his flashlight and stepped toward the door. That's when Rex lunged, grabbing Daniels' sleeve with his teeth, pulling him back with desperate strength. "Rex, what's gotten into you?" The dog let out a sharp bark, one filled with fear, urgency, and something Daniels couldn't decode. But he pulled his arm free, gently pushing Rex aside. "We have to check it. Stay close." Inside, the warehouse swallowed them whole. Their footsteps echoed across concrete, the faint scent of oil and dust hanging thick in the air. Rex's growl vibrated through the silence. His body was a live wire, tensed, trembling. Then came the sound. A single metallic click. Daniels froze. Rex barked sharply, lunging toward a stacked row of crates, just as a blast of light erupted from the shadows. Gunfire. Daniels pushed Rex out of the line of fire and dove behind a support beam. His heart pounded. "Shots fired. Backup requested," he shouted into his radio. But before he could finish, a second explosion, small but devastating, detonated behind the crates. It sent a shockwave through the warehouse, knocking Daniels off his feet. Rex yelped as debris scattered across the floor, smoke filling the air. Daniels tried to stand, coughing violently. His vision blurred. The gunman, hidden behind the crates, fired again. Daniels staggered backward, gripping his chest. Rex sprinted toward him, teeth bared, ready to attack, but the gunman had already disappeared into the smoke. The last thing Daniels whispered, barely audible, was, "Rex, stay. Stay back." Rex didn't listen. He pressed his body against Daniels, whining, nudging his face, begging him to get up. But Daniels didn't move. The warehouse fell silent except for Rex's desperate cries. By the time officers arrived, Rex was still there, standing guard over his fallen partner, refusing to let anyone come near him. What they didn't know. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. And Rex had seen the face behind the gun. The news of Officer Daniels' death spread through the department like a shockwave. Officers who had worked with him for years moved through the station in a daze, unable to process how a routine call turned into a deadly ambush. Some stared blankly at reports, others paced the halls, fists clenched, jaws tight. But the one thing every officer shared was guilt. Detective Harris slammed a folder shut. Why was he sent alone? He demanded. A warehouse call at night? Daniels never should have been the only unit out there. No one answered. Across the room, Sergeant Miller rubbed his face, voice trembling. He asked for backup, but it didn't reach dispatch in time, or maybe someone didn't respond. His words hung heavy in the air. Meanwhile, Rex sat in the corner of the station, wrapped in a medical blanket, refusing food and water. His fur was still dusted with ash from the explosion. Every time someone approached him, he lowered his head and let out a soft, broken whine. Officers who tried to comfort him felt their hearts crack at the sight. "Look at him," Officer Ramirez whispered. "He hasn't moved since they brought him in." "Dogs feel loss," another officer murmured. "But this is something deeper." Deep inside, many of them wondered if Rex had been trying to warn Daniels. They remembered the dog's tense behavior earlier that morning, the way he growled at shadows, the way he focused on Sergeant Collins during briefing. Collins himself sat alone in the break room, staring at his coffee, face pale. "He kept watching me," Collins muttered under his breath, though no one was there to hear. "It's like he knew something." The department launched an internal review, but every answer only created more questions. Why had Daniels gone in without waiting for backup? Why had the gunman vanished without leaving a trace? And why did Rex, the most disciplined K-9 in the unit, seem terrified before the call? The chief gathered everyone for a final, somber announcement. "We honor Daniels at his funeral tomorrow," he said quietly. "But this investigation is far from over. Something about that night doesn't add up." Heads nodded. But no one realized yet that the real clue wasn't in the files. It was in Rex. And soon, the dog's unexplainable behavior would point them toward a truth darker than any of them imagined. The morning of the funeral arrived heavy with gray skies, as if the world itself was mourning. Officers lined the walkway leading to the hall, their uniforms pressed, their faces somber. Daniel's casket, polished, dignified, draped with the folded flag, was carried inside with slow, reverent steps. But even before the crowd could settle, everyone noticed the same thing. Rex was already there, and he wasn't moving. He had slipped from the handler's grip the moment they opened the doors, trotting straight to the casket with a determined, heartbreaking certainty. Without hesitation, he leapt gently onto the lower edge and eased himself inside, laying his head on Daniel's still chest as though returning to his rightful place. Whispers spread through the room like ripples in water. "Is he going to stay there? He hasn't listened to a single command since yesterday. I've never seen a K-9 act like this." Officer Harris stepped forward and knelt beside the casket. "Rex," he whispered, voice cracking. "Come here, boy. Come on." Rex didn't even flick an ear. He pressed himself deeper against Daniel's, his breaths slow and shallow. His eyes were tired, beyond tired, and filled with something raw and hollow. Officers who had seen Rex chase armed suspects without hesitation now watched him tremble with a silent grief they could feel in their bones. A younger officer approached with a small bowl of water. "Maybe he's dehydrated. He hasn't eaten since the night it happened." She placed the bowl near Rex's nose. Nothing, not a sniff, not a movement. The chief approached next, his usually steady posture visibly shaken. "Rex," he murmured, "you served him well, but you need to come out now." Still, the dog didn't budge. A K-9 handler tried reaching in, gently taking Rex by the harness. "Easy, boy. Easy." Rex let out a deep, sorrowful sound. Not a growl, not a bark, but a warning made of pure heartbreak. The handler froze, eyes widening. He had trained dozens of dogs, faced aggressive strays, corrected stubborn pups, but he had never heard that sound before. "It's like he's protecting him," someone whispered. "Protecting him from what?" another officer asked. But Rex wasn't guarding the body. He was guarding the truth. As the service began, speeches echoed through the hall, stories of Daniel's bravery, loyalty, sacrifices. Officers wiped tears discreetly. Families cried openly. Yet throughout every word, every silent moment, every trembling breath, Rex never lifted his head, not when the honor guard saluted, not when Daniel's mother broke down at the podium, not even when they played the final call over the speakers. Officer Daniels, end of watch. Rex simply lay there, unmoving, as if abandoning that casket would mean abandoning Daniels all over again. And while everyone believed they were witnessing a dog's grief, they were only half right. Rex wasn't refusing to leave because of loss. He was refusing because something had been left behind, something he knew they needed to find. The funeral progressed, each moment heavier than the last, but Rex's refusal to move had now become impossible to ignore. Officers exchanged tense glances while civilians whispered, unsure whether to feel heartbroken or unsettled. Even Daniel's family, through their tears, watched the dog with a strange mixture of sorrow and concern. Chief Warren, a man known for unwavering composure, stood near the front row with his arms crossed tightly. He had commanded countless operations, navigated political storms, and delivered eulogies for fallen officers. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of Rex curled inside the casket like he was guarding sacred ground. "Something's wrong," he murmured to himself. Lieutenant Harris stepped beside him. "Sir, grief can affect dogs, too. Maybe he just—" "No," the chief cut in softly. "This isn't just grief. Look at him. He's alert, watching, refusing to leave. It's like he's waiting for something." They both turned toward the casket just as Rex shifted slightly, only to tighten his body protectively over Daniel's, pressing one paw across the officer's uniformed chest as if shielding it from unseen danger. The chief exhaled sharply. "Get Dr. Myers," he said. "Now." Within 20 minutes, Dr. Elaine Myers, the department's trusted veterinarian and canine behavioral specialist, arrived at the hall. She walked quietly toward the front, her eyes widening as she observed Rex's posture. "This is unusual," she whispered. "He's not displaying avoidance or anxiety. He's displaying protection." "Protection from what?" Harris asked. Dr. Myers crouched near the casket, her movements slow, deliberate. "Protection is a response triggered by threat, or perceived threat. It means he believes something about Daniels is still unresolved." She reached a hand toward Rex, palm open. For a moment, the hall collectively held its breath. Rex's eyes flicked to her hand. His ears twitched. His muscles stiffened. But then he allowed her to place her hand gently on his fur. "He's not aggressive," she said softly. "He's conflicted, torn between guarding and warning." The chief stepped closer. "Warning us of what?" Dr. Myers gently lifted Rex's head just enough to examine his neck and chest. Underneath the fur, she found bruising, pressure marks, signs that Rex had struggled violently the night Daniels died, marks no vet had reported earlier. "These weren't from the explosion," she said quietly. "Something else happened there." A ripple of dread swept through the room. The chief's expression hardened. If Rex is guarding Daniels, then something about that night doesn't match the reports. He looked around at his officers. "From this moment forward, we treat Daniel's death not just as a tragedy, but as a mystery." As Dr. Myers continued examining Rex, the funeral hall settled into an uneasy silence. Officers shifted nervously, families wiped their eyes, but everyone's attention stayed focused on the German Shepherd curled protectively around Daniels. Then the doors at the back of the hall opened. Sergeant Collins stepped inside. His face was pale, almost sickly, and he moved with the stiffness of a man hoping not to be noticed. He had avoided the front rows all morning, lingering near the entrance instead, speaking to almost no one. But now, forced by the chief's glare, he walked slowly down the aisle toward the casket. And that's when it happened. Rex lifted his head. Not gently, not weakly, but sharply, as if a wire had snapped inside him. His ears shot forward. His body stiffened. His nose flared, catching a scent the human eye could not see. Then the growl began. Low at first, barely a rumble, but it grew, vibrating through his chest, echoing through the wooden floorboards, filling the hall with an unmistakable warning. Every officer froze. "Rex?" whispered Dr. Myers, her hand hovering above his shoulder. But Rex was no longer focused on her. His eyes, dark and burning with recognition, locked onto Sergeant Collins. Collins stopped mid-step, his breath catching. What's wrong with him?" he stammered, lifting his hands as if defending himself from a threat that hadn't yet reached him. But Rex was already reacting. He rose halfway out of the casket. Every muscle coiled, every hair on his back raised. "Easy, boy," Harris whispered, stepping forward cautiously. "Easy." But easy was impossible now. Rex barked, a sharp, explosive sound that bounced off the walls and made everyone flinch. It wasn't grief. It wasn't confusion. It was accusation. Collins stumbled back, hitting a pew behind him. I didn't do anything. What's wrong with your dog?" The chief's gaze hardened, cutting through the hall like a blade. "Collins," he said quietly, "come forward." "No," Collins snapped, panic flickering in his eyes. "He's out of control. He's dangerous." But everyone knew K-9s didn't behave like this, not without reason. Dr. Myers spoke up, her voice calm but trembling slightly. "Rex is responding to a scent memory. Something familiar to the night Daniels died?" A cold wave swept over the room. The chief stepped closer to Collins, face unreadable. "Were you at Ashford Warehouse that night?" Collins shook his head rapidly. "No, I wasn't even on duty." "Your logs say otherwise," Harris muttered, checking his phone. Rex barked again, louder, pushing himself fully out of the casket now, paws planted firmly on the wooden edge. His body pointed at Collins like a compass locked onto truth. The tension snapped. I was there, all right?" Collins shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "But I didn't do anything." But Rex kept growling, kept staring, kept accusing. In that moment, everyone in the hall understood. Rex didn't just recognize Collins. He remembered him, and whatever Collins was hiding, Rex had known it since the night Daniels died. The moment Rex lunged toward Collins, the atmosphere in the funeral hall shifted from grief to tension so sharp it felt like a blade slicing through the air. Collins stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes wide, not with sorrow but with fear. Officers instinctively stepped between him and the dog, though none dared touch Rex. Chief Warren's voice broke the silence. "Sergeant Collins, we need to talk." Collins swallowed hard. "This is insane. The dog's traumatized. He doesn't know what he's doing." But everyone knew Rex wasn't mistaken. He was trained, disciplined, methodical. A K-9 doesn't falsely accuse. The chief motioned for 2 detectives. "Take him outside." Collins hesitated, then began backing toward the exit. Rex growled again, straining forward as if fighting every ounce of grief anchoring him to the casket. Officers hurried to escort Collins out, but even after the doors closed, Rex continued staring at the spot where Collins had stood, as if still seeing a threat lingering in the air. Dr. Myers leaned toward the chief. A K-9 reacting like that isn't coincidence. He recognized a scent from the warehouse, one strong enough to trigger a defensive response. Chief Warren's jaw tightened. Then Collins was there that night. She nodded grimly, and he wasn't supposed to be. The chief stepped aside, signaling Lieutenant Harris to follow him into a nearby room. They shut the door behind them, urgency radiating between them. "Pull the body cam footage," the chief ordered. "Everything from Daniel's last call." "But sir, the report said the camera was damaged in the explosion." Do it anyway." Harris hurried off. Minutes later, detectives gathered around a laptop. The footage was burned, flickered, with static, but fragments remained. Daniel's voice echoed faintly through the distortion. "Negative backup. Approaching north entrance. Rex is agitated." The audio cracked. Then a faint shadow appeared. A figure moving behind the crates. Another flash of movement. Someone ducking out of sight. And just before the explosion cut the recording completely, one distorted frame flickered. A man's silhouette. Broad shoulders, distinctive stance. Not clear, but familiar. Harris exhaled slowly. "That looks like Collins." The chief's face darkened. He lied about his location and about responding. The detectives exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer a tragic accident. This was sabotage, or something worse. Just then, another officer rushed in with dispatch logs. "Sir, you need to see this." The chief scanned the page. His expression hardened with each line. Collins marked himself off duty that night, but his patrol car was logged near Ashford Warehouse at 10:39 p.m., 3 minutes before Daniels arrived. Silence fell. It wasn't just suspicious, it was damning. "What was he doing there?" Harris whispered. "No idea," the chief answered, "but Rex knows something, and Daniels might have known too." Dr. Myers, still kneeling beside Rex, looked up with quiet certainty. "He isn't grieving in that casket. He's guarding Daniels, protecting him from something, from someone." The chief nodded. "From Collins." He looked at Rex, still tense, still watchful, still unwilling to leave. "If Daniel's death wasn't an accident," he said, voice low, "then Rex is the only witness we have." A witness who wasn't going to let them bury the truth. The funeral hall had begun emptying, but Rex still wouldn't leave the casket. Officers spoke quietly, gathering evidence, reviewing footage, whispering theories about Collins. Yet through all the noise, Rex's steady stare toward the door, where Collins had been escorted out, remained unbroken. Then something changed. Rex lifted his head, his ears twitched, his nose flared sharply, as if he had caught a scent carried by the faint breeze sneaking through the open hallway. Dr. Myers noticed immediately. "Chief, look at him." Before anyone could react, Rex suddenly jumped out of the casket. His paws hit the floor with a determined thud. Without hesitation, he sprinted across the hall, past shocked officers and guests, pushing through the doors with a strength no one expected from a grieving dog. "Rex! Hey, get him!" Harris shouted. But Rex was already gone. The officers bolted after him, racing through the hallways, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Rex tore down the corridor, turned sharply, then barreled straight out of the building. Outside, he didn't hesitate. He pointed his nose toward the tree line behind the funeral grounds and took off. "He's tracking something," Dr. Myers said breathlessly. "Something connected to Daniels." Chief Warren motioned urgently. "Follow him. Do not lose him." The chase continued across grass, over fences, through narrow alleys. Rex's movements were precise, not frantic, not confused. He wasn't running blindly. He was following a trail. After nearly 15 minutes of pursuit, Rex reached an old industrial district on the edge of town. Abandoned factories, rusted fences, cracked asphalt. Then he stopped suddenly in front of a storage facility with long rows of rented metal units. Rex barked sharply, pacing in front of Unit 47, scratching the bottom of the door with desperate urgency. "Does someone have a master key?" Harris yelled. The manager, startled by the sudden arrival of police cars, hurried over. "What's wrong? What's happening?" "Open this one," the chief ordered. The lock clicked. The door creaked upward, and the officers froze. Inside the unit was a table cluttered with photos, maps, and police files, diagrams of the Ashford Warehouse, handwritten notes, surveillance snapshots of Daniels and Rex, a wall filled with evidence pins connected by strings, like the kind investigators use to track criminal activity. But this wasn't part of an official investigation. This was Daniel's handwriting, his private notes, his personal warnings. "Oh my God," whispered Harris. He was working on something alone. Rex stepped inside and went straight to the back of the unit. There, beneath a tarp, lay a metal case. He pawed at it until officers lifted it open. Inside were flash drives, voice recordings, and a sealed envelope labeled, "If anything happens to me, follow Rex." The room fell silent. The chief swallowed hard. Daniels knew he was being targeted. Rex looked up at them, eyes burning with urgency. He hadn't been grieving blindly. He had been guiding them, leading them to the truth Daniels died trying to reveal. The discovery inside the storage unit sent a wave of disbelief through the officers. Flashlights flickered across stacks of files, newspaper clippings, and confidential reports, evidence gathered not by a detective team, but by one man working alone, Officer Michael Daniels. Lieutenant Harris pulled down a cluster of pinned documents. He was tracking something big, but why didn't he report any of this? Dr. Myers knelt beside Rex, gently stroking his fur as he stared at the metal case, tail still and posture tense. Chief Warren opened the envelope labeled, "If anything happens to me. Follow Rex." Inside was a single page, handwritten in Daniel's familiar neat script. He read aloud, "There is corruption inside the department. I don't know who I can trust. Rex does. If I don't make it, he will lead you to them." A heavy silence followed. Corruption. Inside their department, betrayal from within. Harris shook his head slowly. Daniels thought another officer was dirty? The chief looked around the dim unit, voice low. He didn't think. He knew. Detectives opened the metal case. Inside were USB drives labeled with dates, recorded conversations, and officers' names. One name appearing again and again, Sergeant Collins. Harris clicked open a drive on his laptop. Audio crackled through the speaker. First, Daniel's voice. "Collins, you're meeting them again tonight? I know what you've been doing." Then Collins. "Back off, Daniels. You don't know anything." Daniels. "I know enough, and I'm not letting you bury this." A final line, Collins' voice low and threatening. "Then you won't live long enough to expose it." The audio cut. Dr. Myers gasped. Officers froze, exchanging horrified looks. Harris slammed the laptop shut. He threatened him. Daniels knew Collins was involved. "And Daniels went into that warehouse alone," the chief said softly, "because he didn't trust calling for backup." Rex let out a soft, mournful whine, then walked slowly toward a small metal locker in the corner. He pawed at it repeatedly. Harris opened it. Inside were torn scraps of Daniel's notebook, pages filled with diagrams, timelines, and phrases circled in red ink. Illegal shipments. Inside, help. Collins coordinating drop-offs. Rex reacted to his scent. Confirm connection. Warehouse, Yeek meeting point. The chief exhaled, his voice trembling with anger. Daniels was one step away from exposing everything. "And that's why they killed him," Harris whispered. Rex pressed his head against the notebook pieces as if recognizing Daniel's scent on them. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, each one carrying the weight of a truth he had carried alone. Dr. Myers wiped her eyes. He wasn't just grieving at the funeral. He was guarding proof, guarding Daniel's final message. The chief looked at his officers, resolve hardening in his voice. Daniels died trying to expose corruption, and now it's on us to finish what he started. He placed a hand on Rex's head. "Show us the rest, boy. We're with you now." Rex lifted his gaze, steady, fierce, determined. For the first time since Daniel's death, he knew he wasn't alone anymore. The evidence from the storage unit hit the department like a lightning strike. Files, recording, secret notes, all pointing to one truth. Sergeant Collins wasn't just involved. He was at the center of everything Daniels had been investigating. and Rex knew it. By the time officers returned to the funeral hall, Collins was nowhere in sight. "He slipped out during the commotion," an officer stammered. The chief's voice hardened. "Lock down the building. Nobody leaves." As officers hurried to secure exits, Rex suddenly lifted his head. His ears flicked, his body stiffened, and then he bolted. Like a bullet, he shot across the hall, claws scraping the polished floor as he followed an invisible trail only he could detect. "Rex! Stop!" Harris shouted, but the dog didn't break stride. He slammed his body into a side door, bursting it open, and sprinted down a long corridor leading to the administrative wing of the building. Officers chased after him, hearts pounding, unsure what they would find but trusting the one creature who had never been wrong. Rex skidded to a halt outside a closed conference room. Low growls rumbled from his chest. Inside, muffled footsteps echoed. The chief whispered, "Collins is in there." Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the hall. Weapons drawn, officers flanked the doorway. Collins' voice drifted from inside, panicked, shaky, frantic. "I just need time. I can fix this. I can still fix this." Harris shouted, "Collins, open the door." "No," Collins yelled. "You don't understand what's coming if this gets out." The chief nodded. "Breach." The door burst open. Collins spun around, sweat streaking down his forehead. His uniform was half removed, revealing scratches on his arms, scratches that looked an awful lot like claw marks. Rex lunged forward but stopped just inches away, barking furiously, body rigid with recognition. Collins stumbled backward, eyes wild. "Get him away from me. That dog is crazy." "No," the chief replied coldly. "He's finally telling us the truth." Rex barked again, stepping closer, sniffing the air around Collins. His posture was unmistakable. Ears pricked, tail stiff, stance assertive. This wasn't grief. This was identification. Dr. Myers arrived, breathless. "Chief, Rex is performing a scent match. He's confirming Collins was at the warehouse." Collins' face twisted. "You can't use a dog to accuse me." "But Daniels used him," Harris said quietly, "and we found Daniels' files, your voice recordings, your threats." Collins sagged against the wall, face draining of color. "You don't know what they made me do," he whispered. "Who?" the chief demanded. Collins shook his head violently. "They'll kill me if I talk." Rex snarled, a deep guttural sound that filled the room. Collins flinched. Fine. I was there that night. I met the buyers at the warehouse. Daniel showed up unexpectedly. He wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to warn him off, but he pushed. He pushed too hard." "You killed him," Harris whispered. "No," Collins yelled. "I didn't plant the explosive. Someone else did. I was supposed to clean up the evidence after, but Daniels had Rex with him, and that dog recognized my scent." Rex growled again, stepping closer. Collins backed into a corner, defeated. The chief raised his hand. "Hi, Sergeant Collins. You are under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, obstruction of justice, and for your involvement in the death of Officer Michael Daniels." As officers moved in to cuff him, Collins stared at Rex with hollow terror. "That dog," he muttered, "was the only thing Daniels trusted." Rex stood tall, unblinking. The truth was finally in the open, and justice, Daniels' justice, had begun. Collins' arrest shook the entire department, but what followed in the next hour broke them in ways none of them were prepared for. After Collins was taken into custody, Rex returned to the funeral hall on his own, moving slowly, almost cautiously, as though the weight he'd been carrying for days had finally begun to ease. Officers followed behind him in silence, some with relief, some with shame, and all with a growing sense of dread. Rex padded back to the casket, climbed in gently, and curled once more against Officer Daniels' chest. But this time, something was different. He wasn't guarding anymore. He was waiting. Chief Warren approached, holding the metal case recovered from the storage unit. Inside were the final recordings Daniels had left, files no one had dared to open yet, fearing what they might contain. Harris connected the device to a speaker and pressed play. Static crackled. A low hum filled the room. Then Daniel's voice emerged, shaky, breathless, and painfully human. "If you're hearing this, something has happened to me." Officers stiffened. A few bowed their heads. Daniels continued. "I didn't tell anyone what I found. I couldn't. Every clue pointed back to someone inside our walls, someone who knew our patterns, our roots, our weaknesses. Rex knew before I did. He always does." Rex lifted his head slightly, ears twitching at the sound of Daniel's voice. "You see, Rex reacts when something is wrong, when someone is lying, when someone means harm. He reacted to Collins days before I understood why." A muffled exhale came through the recording, heavy with exhaustion. "If something happens to me, it means I got too close. It means they silenced me before I could finish what I started. But Rex will know. He'll lead you to the evidence, and he'll lead you to the truth." Officers exchanged looks filled with guilt, because that's exactly what Rex had done. Daniel's voice trembled toward the end. "Please, take care of him. He's more than a partner. He's the only one I trusted completely, the only one who understood what I couldn't say out loud." A long pause. Then, with heartbreaking clarity, "And if he refuses to leave me, it's because he doesn't want my story buried with me." The recording clicked off. Silence engulfed the hall. Some officers wiped their eyes. Others pressed fists to their mouths, trying not to break down. Even the chief, stern, unwavering, unshakable, looked away, blinking rapidly. Rex lowered his head onto Daniel's chest once more, letting out a soft, aching whimper that echoed through the hall like a goodbye. Dr. Myers whispered, "He wasn't guarding the body. He was guarding the message." The chief nodded, voice thick. Daniels trusted Rex to finish what he couldn't, and Rex did. And in that moment, every person in the hall understood. This wasn't just loyalty. It was love. It was truth. It was a final promise, kept by a dog who refused to let Daniel's voice fade into silence. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of movement. Officers rushing through hallways, detectives gathering evidence, prosecutors arriving on site. But through all of it, a quiet, powerful shift had occurred in the department. They weren't just seeking justice anymore. They were finishing Daniel's mission, and everyone knew it. Chief Warren stood at the center of the operations room, surrounded by whiteboards filled with evidence pulled from Daniel's storage unit. His voice carried a weight that demanded attention. "Daniels didn't die because he made a mistake," he said firmly. "He died because he stood up against corruption, because he followed the truth. And now, we finish what he started." Officers nodded, some with clenched fists, some with tear-streaked faces, but all with renewed determination. Detective Harris stepped forward. "We've traced Collins' contacts. He wasn't working alone. There were 4 others involved, 2 outside men and 2 inside our department." A murmur rippled through the room. "Inside?" an officer whispered. "After everything that just happened?" Harris nodded grimly. Daniels identified them in his notes. He just didn't have enough proof yet. "But we do now," the chief added. Within hours, teams were deployed across the city. Warrants were served, homes were searched, devices were seized. The network Collins had protected, smuggling weapons, laundering money, manipulating evidence, was dismantled piece by piece, and every major breakthrough came from something Daniels had started and something Rex had led them to. News of the arrest spread quickly through the community. What had once been a tragic headline, "Officer Killed in Warehouse Explosion," now became a story of courage, sacrifice, and justice. Candlelight vigils appeared outside the police station. Families brought flowers and signs thanking Rex. Even children left drawings of him beside memorial candles. By evening, the entire department gathered once more in the funeral hall, not for sorrow this time, but for closure. Chief Warren stepped onto the stage. "Michael Daniels was more than a good officer," he began. "He was a man who refused to look away from the truth, even when it put him in danger. A man who fought corruption from within, alone, except for the partner who never left his side." He looked down at Rex sitting in front of the casket, calm now, head high, eyes alert. Rex is not just a K-9. He is a hero. Without him, Daniel's story would have been buried. Without him, justice would never have come. Officers and civilians alike rose to their feet, applauding through tears. Rex didn't move at first, but when the applause softened into a quiet murmur, he walked forward and placed his paw gently on the edge of the casket, as if accepting the honor not for himself, but for Daniels. Dr. Myers whispered from the front row, "He understands. He really understands." And as the chief stepped down from the podium, he spoke the words that finally brought peace to the room. Michael Daniels. Mission accomplished. For the first time since his partner's death, Rex let out a slow, steady breath. Justice, true justice, had finally been served, and Daniel's story was no longer in danger of being forgotten. The sun was beginning to set outside the funeral hall, casting long golden beams through the stained glass windows. The warm light softened the room, painting the walls with quiet colors, gentle blues, soft reds, and deep amber. For the first time all day, the hall didn't feel heavy with grief. Instead, it felt peaceful. Officers remained standing in silent rows as the honor guard prepared for the final salute. A gentle hush fell over the room. The casket was ready to be closed, but there was one final moment that everyone waited for, one final goodbye that belonged to only one soul. Rex. He stepped forward slowly, not pushed, not guided, not commanded. This time, he came entirely on his own. His paws moved with reverence as though every step carried the weight of years, years of loyalty, service, companionship, and trust. When he reached the casket, he paused. For a moment, the entire hall held its breath. Then, something extraordinary happened. Harris took out a small device, the same one that held Daniel's final recordings. He hesitated, looked toward the chief, who nodded. With trembling fingers, Harris pressed play. Daniel's gentle voice filled the hall once more. "Good boy, Rex. I'm right here." The moment the voice echoed through the room, Rex froze, not out of fear, but recognition. His ears perked, his eyes softened. Slowly, he lifted his head as if searching for the man who had always stood by his side. Then he stepped closer. Very gently, Rex placed his head inside the casket, resting it on the sleeve of Daniel's uniform, right where Daniel's arm used to lay when the two rode together on long night patrols. A low, soft whimper escaped him, not of pain, but of release. A final goodbye. Officers wiped tears from their faces. Family members sobbed quietly. Even the chief turned away, overwhelmed. Daniel's mother stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached out to Rex. "Thank you," she whispered, stroking his fur. "You stayed with him until the very end." Rex didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing deeply, memorizing the moment, the scent, the presence, one last time. When the recording ended, Harris whispered respectfully, "It's time." But Rex didn't resist. For the first time since Daniel's death, he lifted his head on his own. He stepped back, not hurriedly, not reluctantly, but peacefully, as though he finally understood that Daniel's story was complete, that justice had been served, that he had fulfilled his promise. The honor guard stepped forward and gently closed the casket. A soft click echoed through the hall. Rex sat down, watching silently, calm at last. As the casket was lifted and carried toward the exit for the final procession, Rex walked beside it, not inside it, not clinging to it, but proudly, as a partner once more escorting his officer home. Outside, the entire town had gathered. People lined the streets, holding candles, placing hands over their hearts. Many had signs that read, "Thank you, Officer Daniels. Thank you, Rex." When the procession began, Rex lifted his head to the sky, letting out one long, powerful bark that echoed across the quiet evening. A tribute, a promise kept, a partner's final salute. Officer Daniels may have fallen, but because of Rex, his truth, his courage, and his legacy would live on forever. This story teaches us that true loyalty goes far beyond words. It is shown through actions, courage, and standing by what is right, even when no one is watching. Officer Daniels fought for truth, and Rex proved that integrity leaves a path others can follow. It reminds us that justice often requires bravery, that corruption can hide in trusted places, and that one determined voice, or one loyal dog, can expose the truth. Most importantly, it shows that love, loyalty, and honesty have the power to outlive us, inspiring others long after we are gone.